How are you feeling? That's what today's show is about, right now on The Leadership Voice. Welcome to The Leadership Voice. I'm your host, Jay Barbuto. Today's theme is mental health and wellness. We have two brilliant guests, Dr. Ehsan Gharadjedaghi and Dr. Phoenix van Wagoner. We also have a leadership lesson and a lot of great things coming. So let's get things started with our quote of the day. Today's quote comes from internet.game/blog. Creating a mentally healthy workplace begins with recognizing everyone's struggle, even if it's not visible. Our first guest today is Dr. Ehsan Gharadjedaghi. Dr. Gharadjedaghi is a licensed clinical psychologist in private practice, specializing in couples and sex therapy, as well as addiction treatment. He is also the founder and chairman of the board of Norooz Clinic Foundation, a nonprofit mental health community center providing affordable behavioral health care since 2012. He has trained more than 105 therapists and psychologists that actively serve the community. Mental health is his purpose. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Ehsan Gharadjedaghi.
Thank you, Dr. Barbuto. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you for coming and sharing your wisdom and insights around mental health and wellness. First, let's start off. Why did you start the organization, the Norooz Clinic?
So there are a couple of reasons. One is a reason that has to do with the name. Norooz is the Persian name for new day, which is used for new year. And it really symbolizes mental health to me, which is rooted in the idea that every day you have the opportunity to determine your life, maximize your opportunities, regardless of any type of obstacle that has happened in your past. So that was really a passion behind incorporating mental health in a way that people can relate to it. So we can step away from, let's say, stigma around mental health. Now, in terms of the clinic, I wanted to really provide an opportunity for very much people like myself, interns, students, prior to licensing, who were struggling with finding a place to complete their so-called internship residency. And there's always a scarcity around that. And I thought, well, why don't I help that whole purpose by founding a location where basically we can provide training and internship opportunity. At the same time, that would also serve the community because interns mostly work for free. I did myself 4,500 hours of free work. So it would provide a little bit of a lower kind of a barrier to entry for people who would want to get affordable mental health. And it just jived well. So we created the Norooz Clinic. I brought on a few interns for myself under my supervision. And then it grew. It was 12 years ago. And in fact, the 105 therapists, as you mentioned, they have grown now to 115 as of December, that we have trained at Norooz Clinic, and we have provided more than 4,500 therapy sessions, plus really helped more than 20,000 people, I would say, be exposed to benefits of mental health.
So there's a really a nice need that the Norooz Clinic was designed to fulfill, because you have your healthcare professionals, students preparing for a career that need to get their hours of counseling, of therapy, and they get the opportunity to intern and build up their hours at the Norooz clinic. And then you also have the community that maybe needs mental health opportunities,
Yes.
mental health and counseling opportunities.
Yes.
They now get a low-cost option to be able to provide these services.
Absolutely.
What a great combination. So how widespread is mental health in our society right now?
Yeah, that's something I would like to take a little bit of a different angle in terms of describing that, the spread of it, so to say. Because I believe something that's a problem, part of the stigma, is to think of mental health very much in a black and white way. Like some people have mental health problems and others don't. That's not the case. Mental health is very much like physical health, part of the whole human being. That means every one of us, as long as we are breathing and we are thinking and we are calling ourselves a human being, we face challenges in life. And those challenges many times are physical, physiological, economic, societal, but on a daily basis, they're actually mental, if you think about it. They're behavioral. Every single day, from the moment we wake up to the time we go to sleep, and sometimes even throughout sleep, we are facing those challenges on a constant basis. Now, there is certainly a threshold, right? Because every human being deals with these challenges to the best of their abilities. They maximize these resources they have up to a point where these resources break down. So we have to pay attention, what's that threshold? Every human being certainly does their best as they can, given their resources, to master those types of challenges throughout the day. But there is a point where they can actually hit a wall, where there are not enough resources. And by resources, we can think of a lot of things: emotional regulation, habits that we have, certain norms, and even certainly economic, but it's not just economy. There are a lot of times, we know from the field of psychology, the most stressful source of an event that happens in a person's life are interpersonal stress. So relationships. What are our resources in terms of relationships, being able to master and overcome the challenges and stress friction, some kind of battle that happens between people as they're trying to negotiate their way on a daily basis with each other, with the society, and within themselves. So mental health is a constant thing that is happening to every human being.
And so a person that's experiencing mental health challenges, they shouldn't view it as something that is just something that they have to solve on their own.
Definitely not. As we all know, this is established fact that human beings are simultaneously an individual, at the same time they're a social being. So that's definitely a balancing act. We have to figure that out. How much of our reality is occurring within ourselves, at the same time, how much of that reality is occurring between each other, between us and other people. So that within that balancing act, yes, we are not alone, and it's not all up to us. Certainly, there is a space of, I would say, influence and control that we have. But then beyond that, there is a lot of factors that actually impact us outside of our control. So it's more of, I would say, an interactive, interdependent reality between ourselves and the society.
A lot of people have recognized the importance of their mental health, but there are still a lot of people who believe that mental health challenges are some sort of sign of weakness or sign of something they have to hide from others. What would you say to those folks?
We are coming to an era in the world where we have to break down these stigmas, that we have to accept at all levels a whole human being. And a whole human being means that we really need to open our eyes to those struggles that every human being deals with, and nobody is immune, regardless of any type of a demographic characteristics that we want to distinguish by, and therefore normalize that struggle. We've got to normalize the fact that we all as human beings struggle. If we do, then the idea here is, well, how can we optimize the process of struggling in a way that we all can struggle well enough to remain a functional member of the society.
So as we become better at that struggle, it becomes possible that we might have mental challenges, but we might be managing them well.
That's right.
So it helps us separate mental illness from mental wellness.
Absolutely.
So what must organizations do, companies do, to really prepare their organizations for the challenges that mental health is bringing?
I would say very much welcoming the whole person. So recognizing, again, that every organization is dealing with human beings, and human beings as a whole person, they come with challenges. It's not possible to have that type of to have a sustainable expectation where you would expect employees, staff members to almost robotically, repeatedly perform without facing challenges. So if we consider that and welcome the whole human being, then we also allow for a conversation, for a discussion, for that atmosphere of support, understanding, and a space for people to actually feel safe to tackle those issues while they are also simultaneously performing in their roles.
And the organizations can play a large role in managing the potential stigma that can happen. Yes. Could you talk about that?
So like I mentioned, first is normalization. So rather than giving in to the stigma of mental health and mental illness, kind of staying almost oblivious to the fact that every human being could find themselves in a very stressful situation where they're overwhelmed. We can send a message that everybody is actually entitled, if not even called upon, to pay attention to self-care, because self-care is not something separate from work, actually. Self-care is a component of a daily functioning, including work. If we take care of ourselves, mentally, physiologically, physically, psychologically, etc., then we can perform better at everything, not just work. We can be better parents, we can be better leaders, we can be better followers, we can just perform better in all areas of functioning on a daily basis. So it has an immediate benefit for work environments. People can create much more productive, healthier teams to work together.
So if, as an organization, if we can promote better self-care, create mechanisms for folks to be able to embrace more self-care, it's going to pay off not just for those individuals, but also for the organization.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why you see many of the larger organizations, I would say, who happen to be able to afford it, because bringing in, introducing self-care mechanisms into a work environment certainly can be costly. And many times organizational leaders may shy away from incorporating those simply just because of the added cost, and they don't know how to budget that in a way that it makes economic sense. But once you can figure that out, then certainly you would see larger organizations that very famous, Apple, Google, whoever else, multinationals that actually have programs for self-care. Few examples is like even, for instance, daycare, childcare, right? You take care of your employees' childcare by incorporating certain facilities at work that are conducive to that type of a aspect of, for instance, parenting. That's part of self-care. And that's just one example. You can create a lot of different programs that serve your employees to feel happy, powerful, content.
Great. Well, I want to thank you, Dr. G, for joining us and talking about mental health and wellness. We're going to have you back here in just a few minutes, along with Dr. Van Wagoner, for our panel discussion.
Perfect. Thank you for having me.
It's now time for a featured segment of the Leadership Voice. It's today's Did You Know? Today's Did You Know comes from MindSharePartners.org. 76% of U.S. workers reported at least one symptom of mental health condition, and 84% of respondents reported at least one workplace factor that had a negative impact on their mental health. It's now time for today's Leadership Countdown. Today's countdown comes from Better Health Channel. We bring you the top 5 mental health triggers at work. Number 5, excessive workload. Number 4, tight deadlines. Number 3, lack of control over work. Number 2, poor work-life balance. And the number 1 mental health trigger at work is difficult relationships with colleagues or supervisors. Don't go anywhere. We have Dr. Van Wagoner in the studio right after this word from the Giles O'Malley Center for Leadership. The Bringing Learning to Work program is our way of connecting the faculty of Cal State Fullerton with the business community of Orange County and Southern California. We have over 72 training programs that are available via distance or face-to-face. And the faculty come to your company and they deliver the training to your employees.
The Bringing Learning to Work program is really fundamentally, it's leadership programming. We do diversity and emotional intelligence training. We partner with Cal State Fullerton because they had subject matter experts in these fields, and we're really fortunate and privileged to be able to do that.
Many companies can't afford training and development personnel, and so this is a great opportunity to leverage Cal State's faculty to help them develop their learning programs.
The leadership of the center and the students allow me to not only bring leadership development to my company, but allow me to interact with some amazing students who have grit, potential, and just amazing futures in front of them, and I get to take part of that. It's a wonderful feeling.
When your organization is ready to develop its talent, reach out to the Center for Leadership, and we'll help get you there. Welcome back to the Leadership Voice. Our next guest is Dr. Phoenix Van Wagoner. Dr. Van Wagoner is a professor of management at Cal State Fullerton. Prior to this, Dr. Van Wagoner was a postdoctoral researcher in organizational leadership and diversity group at Max Planck Institute for Intelligent Systems in Stuttgart, Germany. His research is interdisciplinary and converges at the intersection of diversity, mental health, and artificial intelligence. Through his work as the founder and director of the Weld Research Lab, Dr. Van Wagoner works to promote a more tolerant, diverse, and inclusive society where mental health is given the same weight as physical health. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Phoenix Van Wagoner.
Thank you, Jay. I'm excited to be here.
Well, let's talk about mental health and wellness, and why is it that you have made this your life passion for research?
It's really personal for me. So when I was in college, I experienced what I would say was my first really severe depressive episode. I was a senior in college. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I ended up not leaving my apartment for 3 weeks. It was actually a professor of mine that reached out to me and helped me dig my way out. And in that process, we actually started doing research together. And that's why I went and decided to get a PhD. And when I was starting to get into organizational behavior research, I realized that not only is mental health a really costly phenomena, upwards of trillions of dollars a year, but it's also something that we don't study enough in business schools and in the field of management. And so I decided I wanted to dive in.
So you had a personal reason for wanting to dig into that, but also after a while, it really, you found a lot of purpose in it.
It's really, really meaningful work, and I find that people really find connection and power in having these types of conversations. It's one of the most surprising things to me.
Now, mental health, when people first started talking about mental health, we heard sort of people were just brushing it away or saying, oh, should this really be a priority? How widespread is this issue?
It is really widespread. So very often people experiencing mental health challenges, they feel alone and they don't talk about it. But when we look at employees, 1 in 5 employees this year is going to experience a significant mental health challenge, likely anxiety or depression. If you just do the numbers, that's close to 1 billion employees this year that are going to experience a mental health challenge. And if you look at the course of a lifespan, 4 in 5 people will encounter a mental health challenge.
So 80%.
Yes.
So knowing this, knowing that it's prevalent, it's not something we should ignore. As organizations, we can't ignore this.
Absolutely.
So how do we be better colleagues at work?
One of the things that's important to recognize about mental health challenges in the workplace is that they're hard to talk about. And that's one of the big barriers that we see in organizations. And so as colleagues, we should listen, we should notice, and we should do so with kindness and compassion. And what's really important to this is to approach conversations about mental health without judgment. And as someone who has an insatiable desire to help, very often my go-to is I want to solve somebody's problems. But that's not what we should be doing. We should be validating people where they are at.
So to be a better colleague, we need to stay open, we need to listen, we need to have good communications with folks, but then not try to solve, but rather try to be empathetic and try to understand where people may be.
Well said, absolutely.
All right, so we know how to be better colleagues. How do we be better leaders?
Well, everything that I said about colleagues applies to leaders as well. We work with our leaders. But beyond that, leaders are hyper-visible. And one of the best things that leaders can do is model the way. They can model healthy behaviors, and in doing so, be vulnerable. What we see is that when leaders actually talk about the mental health challenges they have encountered personally or they have seen in their lives, and they do it in a supportive, compassionate way, it leads to a sea change in organizations.
So do you say it means more when a leader perhaps allows themselves to be vulnerable and shares their own journey, as opposed to just simply saying, we care about your mental health?
Absolutely. Because that leader is taking a risk and actually showing this is how we do it here. We are vulnerable and we care.
So what should companies and organizations be doing to make sure they are setting themselves up for success in being an environment where mental health and wellness can be as healthy as possible?
What research is showing us today is that we're to the point where cultures need to change. Company cultures need to change. And that's a slow process, not a fast process. And so what I tell leaders and companies to do, the first step is to be really thoughtful in the language that we use. The words we use have power. And we can turn ourselves and our organizations into an unsafe place when we use words or talk about mental health in kind of condescending ways or with a lot of negativity.
So as organizations, we've got to really think about how we frame these issues. We have to think about how we treat these issues, how we prioritize them. Do policies need to change as well?
Yes. Policies should change. We should also be investing in training. A lot of things, one of the biggest things we know is that flexibility is one of the key ways that we can actually support employees, and that's something that can actually be implemented without a lot of cost, although it can be painful at first. So I think that's the first thing my mind jumps to when I think of policies is how can you make your organization more flexible to support people when challenges arise?
If a company does these things well, manages mental health and wellness in the workplace, provides an environment where people feel more safe, psychologically safe, or more mentally well, what are the benefits?
One of the things is you're going to see less turnover. You'll see more loyalty in your employees. One of the leading causes for employee turnover now is actually mental health. And it's not that they are experiencing a mental health challenge necessarily, it's that they don't feel supported when it comes to the issue of wellness and mental health.
So if we can create an environment that is safe, we're going to have much higher employee retention.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank you for joining us on today's show and giving our viewers some practical ideas of how to apply some of what we've learned about mental health and wellness today. You're going to stick around for our panel discussion with Dr. Gharadjedaghi?
Yes, absolutely.
Terrific. It's now time for our leadership example. Today's leadership example comes from Ripple Match. We bring you 17 companies that prioritize mental health for their employees. Don't go anywhere. We have Phoenix Van Wagoner in the studio right after a word from the Giles O'Malley Center for Leadership. Welcome back. It's now time for our leadership lesson. Today's lesson will be delivered by Professor Van Wagoner.
Language has the power to build bridges or create walls. Today, we explore how the words we choose shape the conversation around mental health and wellness. Hello, and welcome to the leadership lesson. I'm Dr. Phoenix Van Wagoner, and today we are talking about how leaders can foster a culture of care and inclusion by being intentional with their language. Mental health impacts everyone, yet subtle acts of exclusion, often unintentional, persist. As leaders, it's our responsibility to create spaces where open, honest dialogue can happen without fear of judgment. Subtle exclusion happens when we make statements like, "snap out of it," or "everyone feels that way sometimes." And these phrases may seem harmless, but they invalidate someone's experience, making them feel dismissed and misunderstood. Let's dig deeper. Consider how subtle shifts in language can change the tone of a conversation. Instead of saying, everyone gets stressed, why is it such a big deal for you? Try, I know stress can be overwhelming. What's been feeling especially hard for you lately? Or a personal favorite of mine, simply ask, what is it like to be you today? This small adjustment demonstrates empathy and removes the pressure of justification. It's a reminder that being seen and heard is fundamental to human connection. Leadership isn't just about the big actions. It's also about the words we use every day. As leaders, we must model inclusivity by speaking with compassion and care, and by encouraging others to do the same. Here's my challenge to you. Reflect on the words you use when discussing mental health. Are they building understanding or unintentionally reinforcing negativity? Together, let's choose words that uplift, affirm, and create a culture where seeking help is seen as a strength, not a weakness. Thank you. I am Dr. Phoenix, and this has been your leadership lesson. Let's lead with kindness, and let's lead with purpose.
Thank you, Professor Van Wagoner, for that insightful leadership lesson. Here's a message from the Center for Leadership. We're back now for our leadership panel. Dr. Gharadjedaghi, Dr. Van Wagoner, thank you so much for coming back and joining us for our panel discussion.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So the way this works is that I'll ask 4 questions. You'll each have a chance to answer each of these questions. The first question, Dr. G, you will answer first. And so let's get started. The first question is about errors. What mistakes do people or organizations commonly make that impacts well-being?
Very good. A fantastic question, because most of the time we don't even think about that in terms of mental health. So I would say, I would mention a few errors. The first and foremost error that everybody makes, including people in organizations at the leadership, is that it doesn't apply to me. People think, well, mental health is something bad, something negative, something I shouldn't be thinking about or dealing with. And it really doesn't apply to me. It applies to somebody else. Why should I be worried about it? So that's really the first mistake. And then in addition to that, really stemming from the first mistake, is that we don't do anything about it, right? So we are kind of passive participants as these things occur and issues arise. And therefore, we don't build the muscles that really are necessary to be effective and powerful against certain problems that arise from mental health problems.
Okay, great. Dr. Van Wagoner, same question. What mistakes do people and organizations commonly make that impacts well-being?
So going after that excellent answer, from the organization's perspective, one of the things that we know is that excessive workload and really, really short or really excessive time pressure, these are 2 things that lead to the onset of symptoms in employees. And so organizations, they very often are trying to kind of push for productivity really fast. And it works to an extent. It's not inherently bad. But we also need other systems and policies in place to support employees when that stress and time pressure builds up.
So our second question, and Dr. Van Wagoner will go first this time. What is the one thing that would change how people look at mental health?
For me, I think that what I see is we often have people think about mental health as just a singular thing. It's you're either mentally healthy or there's well-being, or you're on the low end of the spectrum and you're mental illness and ill-being. When in truth, they're actually distinct phenomena. You can be well and high in well-being while simultaneously having a diagnosis and being high in ill-being. You can absolutely thrive. At the same time, you can also be really suffering even if you're not experiencing symptoms that might reach the threshold of a diagnosis. So when you actually separate mental health and mental illness into two distinct phenomena, it actually helps us think about things in a way that can actually separate stigma. You can actually be thriving while having a mental illness.
Dr. G, same question.
Yeah, so what can we change? I would say especially as it relates to businesses and corporate level, look at the benefit. This is what I would tell leaders. Look at the, kind of the synergistic effect, the extra outcome that you can have from tending to the well-being of your employees. An organization is really nothing but people coming together. So the idea of delegating work, delegating tasks and goals to achieve to individuals who come together and really relate to one another and work together can be multiplied. The productivity can be multiplied if actually leaders pay attention to the benefit of incorporating mental well-being for their employees.
Very good, very good. So our next question, Dr. G will go first. It is, what advice would you give companies on the topic of mental health?
So advice would be to take it seriously. We see in the news here and there many times people who seemingly have functioned very well, but they turn on a dime and everybody wonders what happened. And those are the dangers that can lurk beneath the surface. So if we don't take things seriously, we are setting ourselves up for unwanted consequences. So my advice would be take this seriously, take mental health and well-being of your workforce very, very seriously, just like you do about P&Ls and balance sheets and other metrics that matter to a business.
So it should actually become strategic.
Absolutely.
I'm building right off of that answer because it is imperative that companies focus on mental health. Recent data has started to show us that for the first time, we are seeing that employees now rate the importance of their well-being higher than they're rating the importance of their careers. And what does that mean? That means employees might walk if they're in an environment where they are not safe and supported. And that's very, very costly for organizations.
It's now time for the final word. This is an opportunity for each of you to give one final piece of advice or pearl of wisdom. And Dr. Van Wagoner, you will go first.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jay. I'll start by saying people are different. Our brains and our bodies are different. And mental health challenges are one of the ways that we can be different. And organizations need to take this type of difference very seriously because too often we feel alone in our challenges when connection and support and kindness will actually unlock a lot of good things and power in organizations.
And healing.
And healing, yes.
Dr. G.
Yes, well, wonderfully said. Dr. Van Wagoner really summed it up. I think I would like to add really just a little bit of a notion of the times are right for that perspective. Many times businesses follow, again, objective metrics, more or less market-based metrics, user-based metrics to educate themselves what is necessary. Well, in this case, we have metrics coming from the workforce. So the workforce is telling businesses what they need to do better, to work better. So why not listen to them?
That's terrific. And there you have the final word. I want to thank each of you for joining us on today's show. Thank you so much for sticking around for the panel and helping us educate our viewers around mental health and wellness.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you have a question or need advice, connect with us by email, leadership@fullerton.edu, or on Instagram @CSUF-CFL. Thank you for tuning in to today's show where we talked about mental health and wellness. Thanks to our featured guests, Dr. Gharadjedaghi and Dr. Van Wagoner, for sharing your expertise on the subject. Join us each episode of The Leadership Voice where leaders tune in for the latest thinking and practices in the field. I'm Jay Barbuto here at the Giles O'Malley Center for Leadership at Cal State Fullerton, and we'll see you next time right here on The Leadership Voice.
Great.
The TV show. And there'll be like this little thing where it's like this leadership lesson, this little TED Talk thing. That's where Dr. VW, which hasn't caught on yet.
Oh, that's your first time?
Uh,
During the
Dr.
talk?
VW.
oh, just
that's
that
really
thing.